starting the YouTube stream now, so those people are not hearing these instructions quite yet. I'll wait. I'm just slowly delaying. Okay, they should be able to join us now. So anyone who's being waited on the YouTube, you should be joining us live. Hello. Close that window. Okay. So if you're on Zoom today, you're able to engage with us through two manners. There's three options, but only two are going to work. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says Q&A. That stands for questions and answers. You'll be able to click on that and type in a question that will remain on the board for us in an easy to find place. Staff will either answer by typing or will answer live at the end of the presentation. Either way, for the benefit of the folks on YouTube, I'll be reading all the questions that are legitimate questions out loud and replying the answers so everyone can join us. There's also the option to raise your hand. I believe if you click on the participants list and click on yourself, you can say more raise hand. So if you want to do that, we will get to your questions at the end of the presentation. I think Zoom orders it for me. I apologize in advance if I get the order wrong. We won't leave anyone with their questions unanswered as long as we're able to answer them. I think that's it for the housekeeping tonight. We'll just get right into the presentation. It's about 25 minutes, depending on how quickly I speak. And then at the end, there's time for questions. If you have any specific slide you want to see again, we can look at it at the end, or you're able to go back on YouTube. The link is on the Curran Road SCRD webpage there. So here, let's get going. I will share this screen. I think that's up there now. Okay, so as I said, this is the summer 2020 capital funding update for Curran Road wastewater treatment. The map on the screen here is the Curran Road service area. If you do not reside within the blue boundary, this discussion doesn't pertain directly to you, but you're welcome to stay with us tonight. We'll just try to keep the questions related to this specific service area. Tonight we're going to talk about a brief review of what we talked about previously. So if you were able to join us in December and January of last year, this will be a review. Otherwise, it may seem like a refresher. And then we'll go over what we've done for work since then and update you on our capital funding situation. And then we'll talk about what's coming up next, and we'll take some questions at the end. So starting in 2019, we did a wastewater service review. This was a high-level review of all the wastewater services within the SCRD. We manage 15 and operate 2 others as well. We put together some asset management plans for each of the individual wastewater services, and these can be found on the internet there. It provides all the information specific to each wastewater service, including inventory, bylaws, and some preliminary life cycle and operational cost analysis. From that, we went out. We met with the community. You might remember us. We met in the dark, what was that, Cooper's Green Hall, I believe, on a late December afternoon. That was a fun time. We took a lot of feedback and we gathered a lot of information from the residents. We tried to put out some fact sheets to help people visualize the information because it was a lot to digest, and we understood that. And then we revised, based on the feedback, some of our budget recommendations for the board, took them to the board, and a rate adjustment was made last year for most of the wastewater services in the SCRD. Some of the key findings out of last year's service review, well, one of the primary ones, obviously, was that the existing revenue is unsustainable. This means that the operations budget was often greater than the revenues generated from user fees. And the result of that was that we deferred our contributions to reserve funds, resulting in not adequate reserve funds at this time. And that was because future capital expenditures were not planned for. So the ratio of our capital reserves to the expected future capital expenses was often far too low. Now, you may remember, if you were with us in December, the previous funding model looked something like this. We collected frontage fees from every parcel, in the service area, and we collected user fees from every parcel that was connected to the wastewater service. So if you had an empty lot, perhaps you would be charged a frontage fee, but everyone with a house on it was charged a frontage fee and a user fee. Both of these revenue streams were put together into the operating budget, and from that we financed the annual expenditures, including contributing to capital and operating reserves. So there were some key outcomes from this service review already. One of the primary ones was we decoupled user fees and frontage fees. This is important because now it's a lot easier to keep track and the transparency is improved. User fee revenue is now only used to fund operations and maintenance activities, and frontage fees are only used to fund capital expenses. We also had an extensive review of our operations and maintenance requirements. So we audited the operation and maintenance activities. We revised the operations and maintenance budgets to ensure there was adequate funding, and we established minimum reserve targets for our operations and maintenance reserves to make sure that when we needed the money, it was there. This is an ongoing process, and we'll review it annually to make sure that we're not over or undershooting our targets. And related to today's topic, we developed some preliminary capital funding models to help us plan for capital expenses coming up in the future. So what's on the screen now is the current long-term funding model for wastewater services, and we're seeing this model applied to all services in the SCRD now. As you can see, user fees fund operations and maintenance budget, and they contribute to the operations and maintenance reserve. Frontage fees are for capital expenditures budget and fund the capital reserve. One of the common questions we got out of last year's engagement sessions and subsequent feedback, why do we need an operating reserve? Well, obviously, unforeseen expenses can exceed the annual operating budget. I think we can all relate to that in our day-to-day lives. But as a regional district, we're unable to borrow for operational expenses, and so it's important that we have the monies on hand when we need them. Now, it's just to reassure everyone, the operating reserves that we contribute and build up for your service area are only used within your service area. We're not able to use them for any other projects or costs other than the wastewater service provided to the service area they were collected from. So up on the screen now is the Curran Road wastewater operations and maintenance budget change. We saw user fees increase from $475 to $536.75. That's an increase of $61.75, and there was no other changes. We are noticing that we have a pretty healthy operations and maintenance reserve at this service area, and so we've taken advantage of the fact that we're able to use the reserve to offset the increases. So there are some more increases we expect to apply to the user fee over the next couple of years, but as we get to know the system better and refine costs, we may not need to. We're just using some of the operations and maintenance reserves to offset this. The full schedule of the next 5 years will be later in the presentation. So. Some of the things that are important to highlight here, we did listen to a lot of feedback last year when we did this process, I guess this year in the winter as well. And one of the feedbacks we got often was that our models were too conservative. So we took that to heart and we went through a lot of historical SCRD contract data, and where we could, we found places we could reduce our estimates going forward. And one of them was we found our engineering allowance estimates were too high. So we reduced that by 3% to better reflect the data we saw. And we also found we were able to reduce our contingency by 15%. Another comment we got from the public was that we weren't expressing a tolerance for debt that was demonstrated from the residents. And so we considered, where possible, financing larger portions of projects. And finally, one of the really common sentiments we received from everyone is that the uncertainty around future rates was causing a lot of financial stress, understandably. And for that reason, we're proposing to the board that we look towards a 5-year rate structure to provide some, near-term certainty about what's coming up for people's wastewater rates. This would be a process that was revised annually, and just make sure that for the next 5 years we know what to expect and we're ready to finance and budget for it. This is also beneficial for staff who are making planning decisions, and all around I think a little bit of certainty is a good thing. So we also did, and we'll do this every year, we updated the savings and borrowing rates to reflect the current rates. We introduced a variable borrowing rate, and what this means is if we expect to have a 10-year loan versus a 20-year loan or a 30-year loan for the infrastructure, there's different rates that are representative of those terms. We also, another common feedback we got was that the inflation we used to predict future costs was a little bit too conservative. And we did a very extensive review on our construction cost index. And we found that we could apply a variable rate based on when we expect the construction to occur. So using the data we had, using RS Means, which is a common cost estimating software, we came up with a little bit more of an accurate reflection of what we can expect inflation to be based on historical averages. And this is something we're continuing to review to make sure that we're not overestimating our costs, but this is the best data we have at this time. So just a little reminder about some of the confining factors in as a regional district providing services and the finances around that. So in a regional district specifically, the BC government has legislated some framework that we have to operate within. And part of that framework is that local service areas in regional districts can only be funded by the participants of the service. This is a really good thing in a lot of ways. You're not charged for services that you're not benefiting from. But in the case of the smaller areas, especially in wastewater for us, we have a very small number of people that are sharing costs of infrastructure, and we're not able to share those costs with residents who are outside the area. Obviously, all infrastructure degrades over time, and what we see is reduced performance and higher maintenance costs. And we can also expect that infrastructure costs inflate over time. So what we pay today for something is not what we're going to pay in the future for the same thing, and we need to anticipate that and accommodate for those increased costs in the future. So just a little bit of a background, a broad understanding of how we develop these models, so everyone's on the same page. We look at the expenditures we have. We develop a timeline of the anticipated replacement. So, everything we've put in the ground and that we have at each of these wastewater systems, we have a rough idea of how long it'll last based on engineering best practices and our own experience with similar systems and whatnot. And so we develop a timeline of when we expect to need to replace infrastructure. We use the most recent similar replacement costs where possible, so we're not using estimates from 20 years ago if we don't need to. And then we inflate to the future value using the construction cost indices that we showed previously. And then where we anticipate accruing debt to pay for future infrastructure, we include those debt financing costs to make sure that we're capturing the full picture there. And then on the flip side of the ledger, where we accumulate a reserve fund, we also apply interest accrual that adds to the savings for the system. So that's the broad overview of how we do this. And what we're going to do now is we're going to get into a couple examples, but I just want to point out, this is a very key point. As we have more and more systems that are being renewed, we have more and more recent replacement costs, and we'll update these numbers on an annual basis or whenever we can to make sure we're using a reasonable estimate where possible. And then just a refresher for everyone who wasn't able to join us in the winter. There's three main components to your wastewater service. There's a treatment plant with a 50-year life. Some of the minor components like filters and blowers have a shorter lifespan, but the bulk of it has a 50-year expected life. We have a disposal system. Now I have to admit this is an error here. Your disposal system is an outfall and it has an 80-year lifespan. And then we have a collection system which brings the effluent from the homes to the treatment plant, and that has an anticipated 80-year life. And so when you look at this infrastructure, it's intergenerational infrastructure, I think we called it before, but it's something that has such a long lifespan. Someone may move into a community and move out of a community and never experience the replacement of the infrastructure. So it's important that we look at things from a service level, and we consider that the cost of the service doesn't exponentially increase at certain points based on replacement of infrastructure, but instead everyone's able to receive the same service for a similar price throughout the going forward. And that's kind of the target we're looking at here. So with that in mind, I just want to, what I do here is I'll illustrate why we've chosen a 50-year window for our capital models. So what we have with Curran Road, here's your 30 years of anticipated capital expenditure. And you probably notice right away the blips on the bottom here indicating future infrastructure replacements don't match the scale here. And that's probably part of the story ahead of time, a little bit of foreboding. So coming up in the next couple of years, we're going to need to do some work on the outfall anchors. And then we have a new treatment plant there, but the old treatment plant needs to be disposed of. So that's a cost we have to account for. That's a responsibility as a regional district. We can't just ignore and leave it there, obviously. And then coming up in about 20-25 years, we anticipate the UV equipment in the treatment plant will need to be replaced. And when we look at that with the historical rate increase that we've seen at the Curran Road, which is $3.12 a year, we can expect our reserve fund, which is the gray line at the bottom of your screen, to actually be able to accommodate most of these costs. I think in 2025, if that's how much the removal of the old system costs, we'll need to borrow a little bit for it. And what you end up seeing is a small jump in the frontage fee there. But that's not so bad. So then we move out to a 50-year window, and we capture a few more things here. First off, there's a ocean outfall. What do we have here? My arrows are not coming up in time. I apologize. So we've phased the replacement of the collection system. We anticipate we won't replace it all at once. We'll do sections of it. So I believe this is a 3 or a 4 phase collection system replacement. We capture the first 2 phases of that. We capture an ocean outfall collection system and a treatment plant. And those were costs that we didn't anticipate in the next 30 years. And so if we, as those start to roll into our horizon, we need to kind of plan for those replacement costs. And what happens if we go back to that same situation there? The yellow line on your screen is your historical frontage fee. You have a small debt-driven increase early on, and everything looks actually pretty good until we get to 2065. And what happens there is we'd have very much no reserve built up for the treatment plant, and the debt associated with the financing the construction of that treatment plant will drive our frontage fees up from $482 a year to almost $12,000. And so when I talk about trying to avoid spikes in costs to deliver the same service, this is a very good example of something we're trying to avoid. And if we had just built up a little bit of a reserve fund leading into this replacement of the treatment plant, we wouldn't see this sort of spikes. And so this would be a situation where it's kind of like hot potato, and whoever owns the house in 2065 is in for a bit of a surprise. We looked at longer terms because we have 80-year expected life on some of the infrastructure in the system. But as we get into the longer terms, there's more and more uncertainty about changing technology and the demographics and the development sizes. Maybe we'll have high rises on Curran Road by then. Obviously, I don't think so, but we don't want to plan too far in the future. So we feel like 50 years is the sweet spot, and we don't consider the upcoming infrastructure. But it is important to be aware of what's coming up, and it helps us understand what we can expect. So what we have here is the first plan that we're going to demonstrate today, and just show you how it looks across the next 50 years. So we're going to show 3 different scenarios, and these are just kind of illustrative. I should mention, we're coming up near the end, there will be a poll just to poll what the preference of the public is. There was a little bit of controversy at our last meeting about whether these polls should be shared with the board, and so this is something that we'll discuss with other staff before we take that there. But it is a tool that lets us leverage Zoom and the technology we have to just engage with the public as best as possible. Now, obviously, the turnout here is not 100%, and so we understand this isn't reflective of everyone's opinions, but it does give us, just one more finger on the pulse of what everyone's thinking. Um, so anyways, as I was saying, this would be the first plan, and this is kind of what we were talking about last year when we first talked with you. A little bit more of a conservative approach, but one that puts us in a very healthy financial situation. And in this scenario, we would look at a $200 a year increase from 2020 to 2025, and then a 2% annual increase from there on. Under that scenario, we would have minimal debt. On the screen now, the green line reflects the frontage fee over time, and you can see it has a pretty steep start and then a shallow slope after that. 2% annual increase is something that we try to match the consumer price index, or just consumer inflation, and that means that the dollar buying power one day and then down the line, if you increase it by 2%, that's equal. So that means that someone is paying the same equivalent price for the same service, and that's kind of the goal that we're looking to achieve. In this scenario, you can see the blue line that's now on your screen is your reserve balance, and we do borrow for the treatment plant coming up, but we've saved up close to 85%, 90% of the expected costs, and this leaves us in a situation where the debt associated with that does not drive the frontage fee to get more expensive in that year, and it allows us to have a consistent increase across time. So an alternative plan that we came up with, plan number 2, that will be on the poll if you're interested in participating. This one looks at a $100 a year increase from 2020 to 2030. So we start at the same amount, and we go to 2% increase at the same dollar value, but it takes us twice as long to get there. And the result of that is a lower reserve balance. We're closer to 70%. And you can see that there's a requisite jump in the amount of money we need to collect to afford that the loan associated with that reserve. We're borrowing $3 or $4 million, and we need to pay it back over 20 years. So that ends up driving the frontage fee up there. Now, this plan is still a fairly healthy plan, and I do think that if we're in a situation where we have a 70% reserve going into a replacement of infrastructure, that's great. But it is important to be cognizant, of course, that we will have a couple more expensive items coming up behind it. So, we may see some jumps that are caused by this, and maybe as we get closer to there, we need to have a course correction. But this is a moderate approach in the immediate future that still results in a healthier reserve balance than if we didn't do an increase. And finally, we got a lot of requests for minimal increases, and I just want to demonstrate again, if we looked at a $50 a year increase for the next 10 years, and then 2% beyond that, we get back into the situation where we're jumping up in several $1,000s of a debt-driven increase in your fee here. That's not ideal, and one of the things that we hear sometimes is, why don't we just continue $50 every year? When we exceed the 2% annual increase target here, what that means is the people in the future are paying more than people currently, and that's not really equitable. So ideally, we wouldn't be in a situation where we have a consistent increase forever that's above 2% annual increase. We'd like to get to a situation where 2% allows people to pay the same amount for a long time and still have a healthy financial situation for their system. And you can see in this one, I've put the reserve on in yellow. We're looking at about 30% reserve of the expected costs and a large debt associated with it. So what I've put on your screen now is a comparison of the 4 fee schedules that we discussed about. The yellow one is your historical frontage fee increase. The purple one is the alternative plan, or the third one I demonstrated. The brown one being the second, and the green the first. As you can see, the brown and the green are fairly similar. The brown one has a little bit less of a impact in the immediate future. So that is just a comparison of those 4 things we looked at previously. And what we want to talk about is a 5-year rate structure, because that's what we're asking the board to commit to here in the future. So that will allow us to have some cost certainty. And we're talking about 5-year rate structure. We're just talking about the first 5 years, the stuff inside that red box there in the graph. So, we're aware of what's happening down the road. We're predicting what's going to happen, but this is what we're asking for action on right now, and we'll continue to revise these as we go forward. And so with that in mind, this is the hard numbers that I'm sure everyone's curious about. I've included the user fee in the left column if just to give a holistic cost of operating the system and for the residents themselves. So as I mentioned earlier, we are anticipating the user fee to increase 2 more times from its current $536.75 to $685.38. That is up to a annual review, and that's based on optimal service and full staffing levels. So this will be something we review on an ongoing basis. And then the 3 columns to the right of that show Plan 1, Plan 2, and Plan 3. Plan 1 in the column would be the frontage fee, and then the total of the same color beside it is the combined cost of your frontage and user fee. So this will show you in Plan 1, in 2023, you'd be paying $753 in frontage fees and $1,438 total, including your user fee. So that's how these work. And I think at this time, I'll just take an opportunity to pause for a second, and I'll put this poll up here, and feel free to answer if you'd like, just which of these make sense to you and which you'd prefer to see imposed going forward. Okay, I'll just give it another 30 seconds here if people want to take the opportunity. I know it took me a while to find the button the first time it came up, so I'm not sure what it looks like on everyone's various devices. Okay. Oh, we're still getting votes. And just as a reminder, this poll is informal, and just to give us one more opportunity to solicit feedback, and some people aren't comfortable typing or talking, so this is one more way they can have their opinion heard. It's not binding, and we're definitely not going to hold anyone to what the decisions here say, but hopefully it's valued as one more piece of input. Okay, that's been 2.5 minutes, so I'm just going to close the poll. Thanks everyone for taking part. It's much appreciated. If you didn't get a chance to get your vote in, feel free to send us an email at the end and let us know what you're thinking. It's always a good way to get a hold of us. So it seems like the residents favor Plan 3, and that would be understandable, with some votes for Plan 2 and Plan 1 as well. I think that's what we're seeing in almost all the systems. There's a variety of benefits and consequences to each of these plans, and I think we can all agree that it's not a very simple issue. So with that in mind, we'll just go forward and finish this presentation here. coming up, we have to finalize these funding models. I'm going to make sure we go through them with a fine-tooth comb, cross our T's and dot our I's. Where possible, we'll continue to pursue grant opportunities for future work. I think Curran Road doesn't have tons of things coming up, but with the disposal of the old treatment plant, that's definitely something that could be a perfect opportunity for a grant where it comes to improving the environment and that sort of thing. And so if anything is available when that's coming up, we'll be looking at that to apply for it. We'll be presenting our 5-year rate structure to the board for their consideration and to provide staff and residents with near-term rate certainty. And then on an annual basis, we'll be reviewing the operations and maintenance budget, projecting maintenance costs and making sure that what we see is what we predicted, and making sure that the operating reserves for all the systems are adequate for what they need to do. Just concluding my presentation here, I think that one of the key points obviously is that the current rates are not financially sustainable. We're going to get in a situation where borrowing is going to drive costs into a very unsustainable situation. There are multiple ways to finance 50-year capital expenditures, and this is more of a predictive than a prescriptive application. And finally, an annual review will maintain up-to-date information, and we'll make sure that what we use in our models is the most current information where possible. So that's all I had to say today. If you have any questions, please check the websites. We have the scrd.ca/curran-road and scrd.ca/wastewater. And also you can email us anytime at info@scrd.ca, and that'll be sure to get to my inbox. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll start answering some questions here. So if anyone wants to put their hand up, feel free. And I have a couple questions in the box there. First question is $12,000 a year in $2020 or $2060? That'd be $2060. Which we could back calculate, but I haven't got that calculation to get the equivalent today. Is the inevitable lawsuit factored into the financing if we're forced to pay for something we'll never benefit from? I don't think that that's something we're going to cover today. Anything that's a potential lawsuit or anything like that is probably not the best topic to discuss. And I'm perfectly honest with you, I'm not super familiar with the litigation or anything like that around the Curran Road. So I do appreciate there is some complications and stuff, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. So thank you for the question. I have Mr. Don Capenda. I apologize if I butcher your name. Feel free. Please go ahead, sir. I can kind of. Hi. Hello? I can hear you.
Oh, great. First time I've ever used Zoom. Can you hear that?
Doing great.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, I live right across the street from the sewer plant, and I've sent a couple of messages, phone messages to the other gentleman, not yourself, was another gentleman that I had left messages with, but he never returned any of my phone calls. And it's regarding to the smell from the sewer plant. And I've lived here a couple of years, and the smell is continuous. Almost every day. Some days, not so. Today I was out doing a little gardening, and yes, I could smell it. My wife too. People that walked by have stated that yes, there's a smell. And I spoke to a couple of months ago. I spoke to a couple of the gentlemen working at the plant from the SCRD, and they said, I asked them what's the problem, and they said that the Mr. Trousdale, who I guess he's one of the original developers, had come and opened up, somehow cut into one of the pipes or something. I have no idea what it's about, but they told me that's what was causing part of the smell. But the smell, of course, was prior to that. Anyways, I'm just wondering what can be done about that. It's just an ongoing problem, and I live right across the street, and I'm kind of tired of smelling sewage all the time.
totally understandable. I'm just gonna, if Cody is able to answer this question, I'll pass it off to her. I'm not as familiar with the ongoing operational side of things, and fortunately, in my day to day, I don't have to deal with much sewer smell as part of my job. But Cody, if you'd like to answer that.
Hi, Dawn. It's Cody, the superintendent. So there's been some smell issues came up probably over the course of the last couple of years as we were trying to correct some of the operational issues at the new Curran Road plant. So oftentimes when you're switching over processes or trying to correct processes, it can cause a little bit of an upset in the plant. And then quite some time ago, I guess it was September 2018, I believe, we put the RBC back online because the new plant wasn't giving us quite the effluent quality we needed. And when that happened again, some smell issues. We've been on to the new plant now for quite some time. And yes, one of the things that did happen was a line was going to be connected by Mr. Trousdale into one of the air lines. And so what that airline, what it's supposed to do is force air into the ground, and the ground is supposed to act like a filter. And I believe when Mr. Trousdale was trying to make some improvements, he punched a hole into the wrong line, and now trying to get that line repaired. I think it's just been up to him to try and get out there and find the time to make that repair in the line. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Well, that's what I was told a few months ago, but I mean, how long is this going to carry on?
So part of the problem, and I can't get into too much detail, is that the new part of the plant is still, the SCRD is responsible for the effluent quality, but the actual operation and trying to get the plant to make the effluent quality where it needs to be has been a kind of a team approach. And so Mr. Trousdale really does need to be the one to fix that airline. And I don't know what his schedule is at this time.
Okay, well, why doesn't the SCRD work on that and talk to Mr. Trousdale and let's get these things repaired?
Yeah, definitely. We've, I'm sure you can imagine, you know, back and forth with people's schedules. We've tried to contact him to get him to repair it, and I will certainly try again.
Okay. I guess that's all you can say.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. I would say though, if you have any, well, I'll try again and I'll try and get that looked after right away. And if you're finding that it's not helping within, you know, the next coming weeks, just give me a call. Just ask for Cody Abbott. I'll remember your name and I can discuss further. And if there's some other issues at the plant, perhaps I can help with that as well.
That'd be great. Thank you very much for taking care of that.
No problem.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question, Don.
Well, sort of.
Yeah, addresses it, let's say. I know there's a lot of information on the capital funding side of things that we covered today. So if there's any questions that pop up in your head, do feel free to call us or send an email. I've been trying to get back to everyone as fast as I can. So we do have a question here from Frank Belfry. We'll allow you to talk, sir. Hello, Frank. Go ahead. So I think we need to unmute.
Sorry, how's that?
That's good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the time you've put into this, and it looks like you've done a lot of effort and the like. And I guess I've got a couple of questions here. First one's fairly general. Back in January, there was a board recommendation to have a public advisory committee of some sort. Did that ever happen, or did that get fall into the COVID?
No, I think we looked at exploring that, and one of the problems with the again, I think I was pretty new to the district when I remember talking about this. When we have a advisory committee, like the formal development of one of those committees, there needs to be an outcome, like a question that they answer specifically, and that wasn't really didn't really fit the format of what we were looking for from this feedback. And so until we get to a more concrete problem with a solution per se, it was decided that by doing a specific engagement for every single wastewater service, it would be a bit more beneficial before we got into the um, a committed, something that has to have a concrete outcome. It
Sure.
didn't come out as a suitable format for what
Yeah.
we're doing here right now.
Okay. A couple of questions on your presentation. You talked about a ratio of capital reserve to expected capital expenses. What sort of a ratio were you targeting?
Well, it's difficult for several reasons. We have 15 different systems, and so there's no specific number we're looking for. What we're looking for is what we end up having, and you can see at the end of this 50-year plan, we look at the horizon of 50-year plan, you got your large expense, 45 years, and you have another significant expense at about 49 years. And so if we targeted a specific value for a ratio for each expense, we'd still end up with massive fluctuations in the required income, because some expenses are 40 years apart and some are 80 years apart, and then sometimes they're really close together depending on what point in the cycle of renewal you're in. So we don't target a specific ratio per se, but we're looking to come to a cost that's consistent for all residents to receive the same service. And part of that is looking at the capital reserves we build up, but there's certainly situations where you'll have, and I'm just using hypothetical numbers right now, but you'll have a $1 million expense, then immediately next year you'll have a $500,000 expense. And if you were to save up 50% for the $1 million expense, you would then have 0% for the $500,000 expense. And so there's no specific ratio per se, but we're just seeing how it models out and works based on the parameters we have.
Okay. You mentioned um, there was a fairly good operating reserve. What sort of order of magnitude is that right now?
I'm going off of my memory, and I believe it's October 2019 were the numbers I just looked at recently. They're stuck in my head, but I believe you have about $40,000 to $50,000 in the operating reserve.
Okay.
And the target we have for a system of this size is closer to $10,000. So it's healthy for the operating costs.
Yeah. But then there's the outfall repair to come out of that. Is that right?
Could, exactly. We could finance the outfall repair of that. Operating reserves can be used for capital expenses. Capital reserves can only be used for capital expenses. So
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
why there's always been a tendency to put previously when we had excess funds, we put the operating reserves.
Yeah. The next question, you talked about the RBC and the disposal of that in, I think it was 2025.
Yeah,
Fairly,
yeah.
fairly short time frame. So I guess my question is, you've got the new plant, which is not up to, or how can I say it? It's not up to the performance requirements. It hasn't met that yet.
Sure.
How will, what's going to happen in 2025
Well,
if it's not up there to that performance requirement?
we wouldn't rush disposal until we've gotten confirmation the replacement is operating in a suitable manner. But that would just be the time frame we're looking at. So if we have to push that disposal back a little bit, what we are seeing, and it was introduced last year and will come into effect, I believe, at the end of next year, is regional districts are bound by new asset retirement obligations. So that liability on our ledger asking.
Kyle, sorry to interrupt. You can't really hear you.
Yeah, you're fading away.
Oh, sorry.
Well, there you are. That's better.
I'll start again. So we wouldn't rush the disposal of that asset until we're sure the existing one's operating at an appropriate amount. But as I was saying, there's new rules out there for regional districts as far as our asset retirement obligations.
Sure.
That means we need to account for the costs of the assets, and that's kind of one of the reasons that's on the ledger now. We're just making sure we don't ignore that upcoming cost and have it surprise us.
Just stay close to the microphone.
I'll try. Sometimes it's going in my notes. So
Okay, that's good. Just on the three plans you presented, I didn't vote out of principle, just because it's absolutely new information. I haven't digested it, and the results could get into a report without the context of what they were made on. So, but how many people voted out of interest?
So I think there was, and again, when I do the presentation, I just see the presentation screen.
Yeah.
There's 8 attendees from the service area, and 6 people voted. There may have been fluctuating.
Okay.
So, and you're right. It was wrote to us last week, and I said oversight. I didn't really think about the misinterpretation of this information and potential for that. So I appreciate concerns that maybe misinformed opinions voting, which plagues all democracies in the world. But these aren't they're not binding polls, and the directors have a lot of different factors to weigh. But I do appreciate the point of view that maybe.
It's 6 people out of 50 users or whatever the number is. So, but on your plan number 3, and you said and it was $50 a year, and if you kept $50 a year going for the next till 2060 or whatever, the percent increase would become less and less every year.
It does, and
I guess that puts more of the, instead of front ending the financial load, it kind of puts it in the middle or somewhere further back in time.
It definitely pushes it back a little bit, and it's not something that we haven't considered. It's just it doesn't fully build the reserve targets we have unless you push it back almost all the way until the point is 2%. But it's something we look at, and longer we delay going to % increase, the longer we're pushing back that financial obligation to future residents. And like I was saying, if someone buys a house in between 2 large infrastructure replacements, they benefit from being in between and then not seeing these spikes that would result if we don't get to a sustainable funding model. So.
Yeah. A couple more questions, if you don't mind. Can I carry on, or is there other people that want to speak? Or
at this point, so the floor is yours.
Okay. I've looked at I think I got it out of the budget report, 2020 budget report, just on the code 391, which shows the revenues and expenses. And where in the revenue part or expenses part does it show the allocation to operation reserve? You show administration, wages and benefits, operating, and amortization, which is then netted out and other. So
I'm at a disadvantage. I don't have the document in front of me right now.
Okay.
Not sure that it shows the reserve contribution at that point, or if there's a different point in the budget process where there's a decision to allocate to the reserve. But Frank, if you send me an email, I'd happily track that down for you and clarify for you.
Okay.
Sorry, just kind of answer the question right now.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I guess I've got a whole series of technical questions on the treatment plant, but I might put all those in an email because better to work with it that way. But I guess the principle of the treatment plan, and I know there's some issues going on around the acceptance of it by the regional district, but will that cost the users any money to make sure it comes on board and is taken over by the regional district? And I guess that's my question, because
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, um, there's so we have bylaw. Oh, it's now stuck in my head. 320, I believe, it is the subdivision service and bylaw. And so that kind of stipulates the requirements when the regional districts take over services and begin operating them. And I might have the specifics wrong, going off my memory, but I did write a staff report recently on it. And basically, the rules are. Um, this is just again my memory going, so I could be wrong. The rules are the plant has to be operated to the SCRD's satisfaction for a set period of time before we take over financial operation of it. So we may operate it, we may provide the staff, but that time would be billed to the original developer of the plant until we say yes, it's meeting the effluent requirements. Yes, it's operating as your engineer said it would. Okay, we're comfortable with taking this over because it's what was advertised. And my understanding, I don't know the specifics of this too well, is that it hasn't reached that situation. And so, based on those two, the bylaws, the language of the bylaw, and the situation you have, I would assume that until it meets the standards, the cost would continue to be borne by the original developer and not the residents. There may be complications here because we have an expiring plant and some other considerations that I'm not aware of, but that would be the general set of rules for when we take over.
yeah, and I understand that, but I just see the short time frame for the RBC, and I don't know when all the issues with the plan will get resolved. But I guess my final comments here is just where are you going for now? I said you're going to finalize the model, and I guess I know there was the discussion back in January at Cooper's Green, and there was then the presentation you made to one of the regional committees in the end of January, and kind of held back on the parcel charge for this year. But I guess I see this presentation now as things are starting to come together as sort of the beginning of the discussion, because you've gone away from the trying to fund 110% of future capital costs, whatever that may be, which I think was the basis of the first two iterations. So I think you're zeroing in on where the charges should be, and you've probably looked at other regional district costs, and I have. You circulated that ANOVA Strategies report from North Cowichan in one of the agenda packages, and I had a look at the costs in that, and they're up in the. I looked for wastewater systems, about 70 to 100 people or lots contributing, and they were in the order of, well, 1,000 to high $1,800 per year. So, and that to me is the order of magnitude you've got to look at. As uncomfortable as that may be, I think it's sort of reality. I think however, we're fortunate here in Curran Road that the infrastructure is fairly new. It's 40, 50 years timeline before it needs to be replaced. So that affects my thinking about how much capital expenditure do you need to accumulate, or at what rate you you need to accumulate it. Hence my comment on item 3. And just back to the strategy report, it may be worthwhile for you or one of the regional district people just to talk to that author of that report, or other people that have a long-standing record of working in the asset management field. Just what are they doing in other regional districts, and what percentage factors are they using for construction and inflation? How are they dealing with it? Because those are the factors that you plug into your equations that can really affect what your future cost estimates are 40, 50 years down the line. What are other people doing there?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You know,
so,
it-
and
sorry, go ahead. I'm interrupting.
yeah, I guess I'm just uh, talking on for a minute. So I guess I'll send you a couple of comments and questions in an email. And um, I guess the other comment I had would be um, worthwhile, and we're into an information age of having more ongoing information um, put up on a website. And I know you're running 18 treatment plants, so it becomes an administrative task, but you do have to file reports on flows and effluent quality and all this stuff. And same as water quality issues. Many municipalities put all this stuff right up on a website. And for those that are interested can look at it and see where things are going. I think um, um, just something to think about. Um, I guess that kind of, will we have further discussion on this, or are you going back to the board?
So I think, I have an obligation to take this back to the board this year, and I'd love to continue this discussion. I'm not sure that, um, I'll have all 15 wastewater services have meetings within a month. That's been pretty taxing on myself and my time.
I bet. Does your wife know who you are?
Gotten me. Asked for a few weeks, so that's a good thing. To speak to your first point, or one of your not first, definitely. I am in contact with a lot of other regional districts, and this is something that's asset management is a fairly new beast, even though it is common sense, I would say. So there's different opinions and different methods, and keeping up to date with all that is a lot easier
You're,
with COVID, but it's something that I'm looking to continue to do. Um,
you're fading away a bit.
Sorry, Frank. I'm trying to keep up to date with other regional districts and as best I can. So that's a great point. And we share this information with we have what's called a coastal communities working group for asset management, and that's most
Sure.
Island,
Good.
Powell River, Comox, all those small communities that have similar regional districts, and that's why we had access and we're aware of that ANOVA report. So that's a great point, and we'll continue to do that. And please do send me an email if you have any questions or technical things you need clarified, and I can distribute that to the right people for that. So
Okay. And will you put your tonight's slideshow up
yes,
on the website?
originally I think I told you and Peter Galbraith as well that I would have it up on the website beforehand, and unfortunately it's just been a really long a couple months here. I wasn't able to do that, but once I'm done my last presentation, which is next Monday, I will be putting these all in PDF and having the IT guys get it up on the website for everyone. And if I can do it before that, I will. So that's in the plans. And then your other comment about leveraging the technology and continuing to communicate, whether it's posting effluent reports and water quality reports, or even notices on the specific websites. That's something I want to do. One of the other things we're hoping to get up there is an annual budget, so you can see the operating budget and what your dollars are being spent on. So that's something we're looking at.
Yeah.
Kyle, if I may, Frank, I just wanted to speak to the operating costs of the current plant, the new plant. So
Okay.
not all costs are actually covered by the developer, even though the SCRD hasn't officially taken over the new plant yet. We are still maintaining operating costs in which we would if we were running the RBC. So if it's something that goes above and beyond just normal operations, then the developer is paying for that. And if it's just normal operations, like we're taking our samples and we're recording our readings, then the users are paying for that through our budgets.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying, Cody.
Okay, good. Thank you. Um, Yeah, I'll send you an email in a couple of days. I'm out of town for a day or two, but thanks, Kyle, for all your work.
Awesome. Thank you for your great questions, Frank, and I appreciate you engaging here like this.
Okay.
Okay, I got two more hands up now. We have Don again, so please go ahead, Don.
Hi, Kyle.
Yeah, hello.
Um, okay, I've been a property owner and I still own a home over on the Truman Road situation. And that sewer plant was originally put in by Len Van Egmont about 40 plus years ago. It never worked properly. And a few years ago, the SCRD took it over. And I noticed that they built a beautiful new concrete plant. It's fantastic compared to the one that's in Jorgensen Drive. And at the time they did that, they took it over. There was no talk to any of the owners in the neighborhood about and having any extra fees associated with that. So so I'm just wondering, how does that compute with what's happening on Jorgensen Drive? Because the plant that's there now, it looks like a ramshackle little shack compared to what's over on the what SCRD did to the Truman Road plant. Is that what eventually is going to happen on the Jorgensen plant? Hopefully.
I'll let Cody speak about the future of the Jorgensen there. As far as the Truman Road, which we actually had a presentation last Friday on, and you're able to check that out on the internet if you want.
I just want to mention that I never received any notification of either one. I just found out about this one from a neighbor that contacted me and said that, and my address is there. I get SCRD sends me other stuff, bills, etc. But I never received any notification of this.
Oh, I'm sorry that happened. I pull all the addresses off of BC assessment roster, and I personally stuffed the letters. So I'm sorry you didn't get a letter or an email. Please, if you a foolproof way to make sure you're involved in the communication, if you send a email to the info address, it'll get to me, and I'll add you to a roster I have. And I'll email you. You can tell me which ones you're interested in, and I will email you specifically, because that's what I try to do for everyone who's given me their email from the past engagement sessions.
Great, thank you.
I send out 950 envelopes every time I have one of these sessions, and I get about 450 returned to me. I don't know why. They're the current BC assessment rosters. The only envelopes I don't send is if someone owns 6 properties in a system. I'll send 1 instead of sending 6, just to conserve costs for everyone. So sorry, Don, you didn't get that email. Cody will speak to the future here, but just about the Square Bay one, they were 50 years ago was when the original plant was built, 1970, and they were up for renewal, and they were very fortunate to get a grant which funded 83% of the cost of their plant. So the impact wasn't as much as it could have been. But as far as the future, Cody, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Don again. So the Square Bay treatment plant is a bit different than the current one at Curran Road, or the newer one at Curran Road. So when we put out the RFP for Square Bay, we got a few different design plans back, and basically we used a scoring chart, a matrix. And that's how we scored them, based on kind of operating time, cost, effluent quality, value, stuff like that. And this particular type of treatment process came out the winner. I will tell you that a fast plant like Curran Road was put in as a bid proposal. However, it didn't win on the scoring matrix. So that's kind of one of the reasons why there's a different plant. Another reason is when Curran Road was built, that was all developer done. So the SCRD didn't have input on what type of treatment system went in there. And so the developer, used an engineer of their choice, and that engineer picked the treatment process that was going to go in there. And the SCRD sets out the stipulation of what the effluent quality needs to be, but we don't get involved in what type of treatment process it's going to be. So that's why you see 2 different types of treatment plants that were recently built. I'm not sure if that kind of clarifies. And when it comes to the future, like anything, if the SCRD is involved, we will put out an RFP to tender the process so that it's an open and fair process and anybody can bid on it, and they can bid what any type of treatment process they want, and we will use a scoring matrix to determine what treatment process is best suited. Does that kind of clarify why we have two different treatment systems?
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Don. You have any more questions? I can move on to the next one.
No, I'm good.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate the questions. Now we have John Devlin. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. As a homeowner, I get what you're trying to do. You're looking ahead and you're saying we have a major expenditure coming at us in 50 years, and it would be prudent to start putting the money away for that now. We can invest that money, we can make it grow, everything looks good. So what you should be doing is polling those people who are going to own our homes 50 years from now and get them in on the project and say, hey, you know, you've got this big expense coming, you should be contributing. What do you want to do? Now, we both recognize the problem there. In 50 years, 60 years, I mean, if we go with plan 3, our operating costs are going to go up. Okay, fine. And then year 40, 50, it jumps $5,000. Well, in 50 years, my house is going to be worth what? 20, 30, 40 million dollars, $50 million? Who knows? So that huge increase, that $5,000 or $6,000 that we're asking whoever owns my house to pay 50 years from now, is going to be about the same portion of his mortgage as my $1,000 is now. I don't have a problem with that. You know, I really don't. So to ask me to pay for something, I will, if I was going to be around for 100 years, which I'd love to be, don't get me wrong, I would be 100% behind you. I think this is prudent. Let's do this. But 50 years, I'm going to pay for something for 50 years, and then am I going to live long enough to get any benefit from it? Well, one, I'll never see that construction. You know, why should I pay for it, really? You know, ask the guy who's going to own my home in 20 years from now.
No, that's a fair question, John. I think that, you know, you're not alone in that sentiment. We hear that almost every time we have these sessions. So I guess it's a philosophical question, but I think what I'm trying to say is the service you're receiving is wastewater treatment and the ability to, you know, flush your toilets and have baths and showers and have no problem with that. And that cost should be equivalent today and tomorrow. And I think that's what you're saying with the projected increase of home values and whatnot. So that's why we factor in the 2% annual inflation. That kind of makes sure that the price we're paying in a consumer sort of equivalent is the same from today to tomorrow. As far as you know, you're not. I think when you view it from a perspective that you're paying for someone else's infrastructure, I can appreciate how that's you know, less easier to digest than the idea that you're paying for a service and you should pay the same price as the future resident. But as one thing to consider, I suppose, from a tangible benefit point of view, what benefit, you know, say you move out in 50 years, because I'd prefer to use something less morbid than the alternative. But say we move out in 50 years and we sell our houses, what's the value of putting away all that money for 50 years? Well, you know, similar to if you owned a strata property and the big ticket item on the you know, future coming up, and we identified it, but there was no reserves paid. People buying units in that strata would obviously make a adjustment to their offers based on the anticipated future price or expenditures. And I think that's kind of the benefit here. If we have a reserve, no one's going to be able to argue that they have a spike coming up, and therefore the value of your home should be reduced accordingly. So it is a philosophical tinge to it for sure. I think that you're going to see more and more of the asset management and long-term life cycle costing being considered as projects go forward. It's a component of what the BC government expects us to have in our plans and whatnot. So it's kind of a newer thing, and it's something that'll be around for a while. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I know that it's not something that I'm going to be able to answer and satisfy perfectly, but hopefully that gets to the root of it.
Yeah, not great. I do understand your position. You understand ours.
100%.
Um, we'll just have to see what happens and where we go next. But you know what? When my bill goes to $8,000 a year, you won't assume that I'm going to just sit and do nothing.
Oh, and we're trying to avoid, we're trying to avoid a spike like that. And I think that one of the concerns that was raised, and I think you were there actually in Cooper's Green, was, we're not considering the demographic of the populations. And one of the criticisms that was leveled at me is I was viewing this as a math exercise. I'm not, but I understand where that sentiment comes from. And it did reinforce to the reality that these, the human beings are being affected by these decisions, and I really do respect that. I have a lot of empathy, and we are exploring methods to give people who are on fixed incomes, particularly seniors, the option to defer these utility charges where possible, not the user fees, but possibly the frontage fees. There's some pretty massive restructuring required from a legislative point of view to make that possible, and there are consequences that are, um, uh, potentially affecting everyone. So it's not something that we're quite. I've said this before at other meetings. We're not quite ready to present this idea to the board, but in the near future, we're going to be looking at options so that seniors aren't in a position when they're on a fixed income and these escalating costs are going to force them to their homes. That's why I'm concerned about that as well. So I'm not blind to the people side, and I appreciate your sentiment. So
Okay, just one more point then. Okay, so we go with plan one, and our bills go up. We're paying $3,000-4,000. At the end of 40 years, we've got 85% of the funds for the new plant, and Santa Claus drops a grant on you, saying, "Hey, we'll give you $20 million towards this $25 million plant." Are we going to, in my grave, get repaid some of that money?
no, but again, I believe that sort of value will be reflected into the value of your home going forward. If you have a healthy reserve fund, and that's something the real estate agents are aware of, and it's a selling point. Like this is, this community is in a financially sustainable situation, and it has everything in line. So definitely something I've thought about. Grants are obtainable if especially going forward in the farther future, if we plan accordingly. They're not going to reward negligent financial planning. So putting ourselves in a situation to be eligible for a grant is something that we're definitely considering as a possibility. But if we get it, great. It reduces future debt costs, and we're able to continue to build a reserve. And maybe there's a way to um, you know give some of that finances back to the community, but that's not, it's not just something we're directly dealing with right
Yeah, you see the trap here. I
now.
mean, we're going to pay for the infrastructure. The possible grant comes along. The next guy gets a free ride because it's all paid for. He does the same thing, and we just. So yeah, I don't think there's an answer you can give me for that. So I don't really expect. But I just want to vocalize here at this meeting my hesitations. Let's
And
say.
I see how that quandary arises. I think from if you take away the community sewer side of things, and you go to a single residence with a septic system, say I had a house and I put in a brand new septic system and then I moved, I think that renewed infrastructure component of my house would add value to my house. And so I think that as this becomes an issue that's more universally understood outside of these neighborhoods, so a lot of people have no idea how many wastewater systems are on the Sunshine Coast, or that they even exists as like a self-funded community system. So as that understanding grows, I think there'll be appreciation for systems that are financially healthy versus ones that are in situations where there could be possible $1,000, $2,000 increases overnight, basically, to make sure the system still runs. Because
Sure.
you
But
can't
my,
do without wastewater. Like it's not, you have to.
I get it, but to go to your scenario, my new septic system isn't gonna cost me $1 million.
No, but I've had quotes up of $35,000 for a septic system.
Sure, but you're talking a $60 million plant with 60 people on it, that's $1 million each.
Mhm.
Okay, if I had the option, can I disengage from the sewer system and put my own septic system in and treatment? And because it'd be a hell of a lot cheaper than $1 million, I guarantee you.
I think you have the numbers a little bit confused, but I've run the numbers and I don't think it would be cheaper. We actually discussed that at a recent corporate and administrative services committee, the possibility of dissolving service areas. Um, if you're interested in reading, September 17th agenda has a couple reports on that. It's a very complicated issue. It's not simple. There would be a vote within the community and whatnot. I don't think that's the ideal way to go, and I don't think that, especially on an economy of scale and the way the environmental regulations are going, that'd be recommended. But I understand. I fully understand your sentiment.
Yeah. If you can refer or maybe post some notes on this meeting and maybe some suggestions for additional reading. I mean, I'm not an engineer, so it's like this is all new. I do read and I do learn, and I'd like to be part of that conversation. And if you can provide some additional information or referrals, I will read them.
John, if you want to send an email to info@scrd.ca and just put my name in there, they'll be in my inbox in the morning, and I'll send you a list of some great documents to read to help provide some context and perspective, and we can have a dialogue off on the side if you'd like to continue to raise some more.
No, this I will do, Kyle, right now, and thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, John. I appreciate the questions, and I'm sorry I can't answer them perfectly, but hopefully.
What? You're not perfect?
Okay, we have a question. First off, John asked me to speak louder, and I apologize. I'm I'm in the boardroom. I'm unfamiliar with technology, and I apologize for the sporadic volume. Hopefully, I'm not yelling at you right now. And then we had a question from Frank about 25 minutes ago. I hope you're still here, Frank. In your projections, you have not included possible new lot developments, which looks possible in our area. This will spread the cost over a larger base. Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And, I think to be safe, I didn't want to be too optimistic and predict a build out rate, but every lot that gets added, these costs are just split one more way every year. So if a lot's added this year, next year they'll be on the roll for 2021. And that's an automatic, well, I don't know if it's automatic process, but that's a process to do with getting your building permit and connecting to the service and everything. So as more build out occurs, which would be a great thing, the more built out systems are, the more costs are spread amongst everyone, and user fees especially. So as soon as that happens, Frank, they will be built in and build, and as I was saying, the operating costs are reviewed annually, and so we'll reduce the average parcel rate if we can. So hopefully that answers that question. It's Mr. Belfry, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Just picking up on that previous question about new lots. I know there's an allowance for new lots, and I'm not sure what the number is, but I got the impression from what you said that you hadn't included those in your financial analysis, but you can sort of look at the historical rate of development in the neighborhood and say in X number of years, the lots will be all taken up and occupied or certainly created, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two things, I guess. Like, there is a set number of lots that are developed right now. If you look at the, I wonder if I can show this simply without using everything. But I'll just go quickly back to the PowerPoint slide.
I think it said in one of the reports about 50 users and 70 lots or something to that effect.
Yeah, exactly. So when I say we didn't count for more lots, I guess I misspoke a little bit because um, you can see here here is your map.
Yeah.
Any parcel that's currently identified on this map is being billed a frontage fee, and so they're all contributing, whether or not they have a house on them. They're all contributing to the capital reserves. So
I guess my point is, in the previous question, is that there's going to be another 20 or 30 lots, I don't know what the number is, allowed to develop to contribute to the new wastewater treatment plant, in addition to the lots that are created now.
yeah, and as soon as they're there and registered, we'll spread this cost. If it's we go from 60 to 80, we'll spread the cost across 80, and we'll redo the math. Because the projected cost of the treatment plant won't increase, but your share will be
Yeah.
divided by more.
I guess my point is it will affect the calculations you do now and you have to make an assumption that they're all going to be created in the next 10 or 15 years or whatever time frame you want to use. But it will have an impact because it is more, could be another 20 or 30% or more people contributing to the capital reserve.
Yeah. I guess that's as we have more concrete information that comes out, maybe it'd be easy to predict.
Yeah, well, you've got Trousdale doing 12 or 14 lots now, or Jorgensen's looking at another two. These are all in the
But
public domain, so.
now, so yeah, I think that's a good point. It's hard to um, predict, and then if it doesn't get developed, and we've been assuming there'd be 80, and then there's never is, we're in a bit of a pickle. So
It gives you a range of where the numbers should be. And if you talk to the major landowners, they may be able to give you an idea of what their plans are. Is it within whatever time frame they have to build out those lots? So.
I think that's a great avenue, and I've written a little note here about it. I hadn't considered more lots. This is one of the few areas that isn't fully parceled out.
Yeah.
So it's not a common consideration. So a little bit of an oversight on my part, but definitely something we'll look at, and maybe with communications with the developers there, we could get a timeline and some clarification. You do have potential for more build out. So your user fees, without having more lots added, could be shared among more people if more houses are built. And that's more in a scenario with the developments on the Sunshine Coast. You have about 50% build out, and so yeah, higher proportion of user fees than originally intended. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Something I'll look into.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Comfortably, I don't want to be considerations. I don't want to be overly conservative. So trying to find that Goldilocks point, and this is something that I should consider, and I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Frank. So it's 8:30 now almost, and if we have no more questions, I will end the meeting. I'll give it another few minutes. What I like to do is just talk until you guys leave. Generally, my voice scares everyone away. If you're on YouTube and you haven't been able to find that question and answer button, feel free to send an email to info@scrd.ca, and we'll get to your comments and questions as best we can. All right, I think we haven't got any more questions coming. So thanks again, everyone, for coming. Hopefully, a lot of your questions were answered and some information is here to digest. if you have more questions, please email us. You can call us. I'm in the office sometimes, but not always. And I appreciate everyone coming in, and I appreciate the feedback. So we'll continue to let you guys know through the website and social media. If you send me an email and you want me to, I can add you to the mail-in list for the Curran Road or any other wastewater service. And I hope you all have a great night. And